The hospital waiting room was painfully bright, sterile, and yet somehow suffocating. The antiseptic smell mixed with the heavy taste of fear in the back of my throat. Outside the glass windows, the city lights flickered with life, but inside, time stood still. My daughter Ava, 6 years old, my heart and soul, was somewhere behind those double doors in the trauma unit. She had been unconscious when they pulled her from the wreckage. Her small body limp, blood pooling on her pink dress, the same one she had insisted on wearing for our ice cream date. 1 second. I was adjusting the rear-view mirror. The next, I was slamming on the brakes, tires screeching. A pickup truck had blown through a red light. The sound of metal crushing into metal had been deafening. I had a scratch on my cheek and bruised ribs. Ava had been thrown sideways, even in her car seat. They said she might have internal bleeding. They had to open her up. Fast. I remembered clutching her tiny hand before they wheeled her away. I'm right here, baby. Mommy's not going anywhere. That was hours ago. Now I sat alone in the waiting room, still clutching the stuffed bunny I had grabbed from the wreckage. Her bunny, Mr. Flop. I had called my mother, my father, my brothers. No one showed up. I've got a meeting. My brother, Sam, said coldly. What do you want me to do about it? My mother had sighed. Why were you even driving at night with her? My father didn't answer, and neither did Daniel, Ava's father. He hadn't seen her in almost 2 years. I looked around at the other families in the waiting room. Couples clinging to each other. Friends comforting one another. Everyone had someone. Except me. It was nearly midnight when I felt the bench creak. Someone had sat beside me. I glanced sideways, expecting another lost parent or exhausted nurse. Instead, I saw a man in a dark suit. Expensive, perfectly tailored. His salt and pepper hair was combed neatly back, and his face was lined but calm. Eyes the color of steel. He held a takeaway coffee in one hand and an unread newspaper in the other. Rough night, he said, his voice low and steady. I blinked. Excuse me, you look like you've been here for a while. I figured it must be something serious. I didn't answer right away. I was too numb. My daughter, I finally said. Car accident. He nodded. I'm sorry. Silence settled between us. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was grounding. After a while, he extended his hand. I'm Thomas. Thomas Weller. That name rang a distant bell. I turned to him more fully. Weller, ... as in Weller Industries. He gave a small smile. The same Thomas Weller. A billionaire, CEO, philanthropist, one of the wealthiest men in the country. What on earth was he doing here? You don't look surprised, he said. I'm too tired to be surprised. He chuckled softly, then looked toward the swinging ER doors. My godson is in surgery. Motorcycle crash. They say he's stable, but you never know. I nodded. There was something sobering about pain. It flattened social classes and crushed egos. In here, billionaires and single mothers were just people. He didn't leave. For hours, he stayed beside me, saying little, but offering quiet companionship that soothed the jagged edges of my fear. When a nurse walked by, he stood and politely asked for updates on both our loved ones. When I couldn't speak, he did it for me. He brought me water, a blanket. At one point, he even convinced the nurse to bring me toast from the staff room when my hands started trembling from hunger. You're shivering, he said. When did you last eat? I don't remember. He nodded thoughtfully and returned 15 minutes later with a fresh sandwich and hot tea. He handed it to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Why are you doing this? I finally asked. His expression softened. Because I know what it's like to be alone in a hospital waiting room, as the night stretched into dawn. I opened up. I told him about Ava, how she loved stars and ballet. How she once cried when a bee died on the WINDOWSILL. I told him about Daniel, how he had walked out when Ava was 4, claiming he wasn't built for family. I told him about my parents, who never forgave me for marrying a man they didn't approve of, and my brothers who called me the family disappointment. He listened. Then he told me his story. His wife, Julia, had passed away 6 years ago, ovarian cancer. Sudden, aggressive. He had spent 2 months in hospitals, holding her hand as she faded away. I would have traded every dollar I owned to save her, he said quietly. But money doesn't always matter in here. At 5:12 a.m., the surgeon came out. I stood up so fast I nearly collapsed. Thomas caught my arm to steady me. She's stable, the doctor said. There was significant internal bleeding, but we were able to stop it. She need to be in ICU for a few days, but she's strong. I wept. Right there in front of everyone. Thomas said nothing. He simply placed a hand on my shoulder and let me cry. She's okay, I whispered. She's really okay. They let me see her an hour later. Her small body looked even smaller beneath the wires and machines. But her chest rose and fell. Her cheeks still had a flush of pink. I sat beside her, clutching her hand, whispering stories about the stars we would see again together soon. When I returned to the waiting room, Thomas was still there, holding 2 coffees. You stayed. I said I would, he replied. How is she? She's going to make it. Good, he said, nodding. She's a fighter. Over the next few days, Thomas visited often. Sometimes just to bring me fresh clothes or to watch Ava while I slept. Sometimes just to sit quietly. He never crossed a boundary. Never treated me like a project or a charity case. He treated me like a person. A week later, Ava was moved out of ICU. She smiled when she saw him. Is he the bunny doctor? She asked. Thomas laughed. Not quite. He brought her a new Mr. Flop. She slept with both. When Ava was discharged, I received a flurry of calls. My mother called. We saw pictures online. Was that Thomas Weller with you? My brother messaged. You dating a billionaire now? I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because I finally realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I had walked through fire alone, and someone I never knew before had sat beside me when no one else would. Thomas and I stayed in touch. Then we started meeting for coffee, then dinners with Ava. I learned he was a brilliant cook, that he liked old jazz, that he had a dry sense of humor, and he learned that I wasn't afraid to challenge him, that I didn't care about his wealth, that I still wore my daughter's friendship bracelet on my wrist. One evening, while watching Ava draw on the patio of his house, he said softly, I used to think I had everything, until I sat in that awe. That night, that moment, changed my life. 2 years later, we got married in a small garden surrounded by flowers, stars, and Ava's laughter. My family didn't come, but it didn't matter, because Ava walked me down the aisle holding both Mr. Flop and Thomas's hand, and I finally understood. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when no one else does.